Hello Immigration Nation. In today's video, I'll show you step by step how to fill out your I-918 form. The U visa provides a path to legal protection for those who suffered substantial harm due to a violent crime. It allows them to achieve the American dream, getting a visa and then green card and ultimately US citizenship. And this form is key to the process. You ready to fill it out? Let's get started. First step is to obtain the form, right? You can't fill it out if you don't have it. You can find it on USCIS website for free. Remember, this form, like all your documents for this process, have to be in English. You can't provide anything in Spanish or in any other languages. Let's start with the first part. Information about you. All these details are for the victim who's applying for the U visa. In section 1A, you will enter your last name. 1B, write only your first name. And finally in 1C, write your second last name if you have one. If not, you can write NA, not applicable. Now in section 2, you'll write other names you have used, aliases, for example, maiden name and in nicknames you have. Also, if you've ever been arrested for anything and gave a different name, gotta fix it, gotta include it here. U visa includes a waiver, but if you don't ask for a waiver to fix things that make you ineligible, you're not forgiven for them. In the home address section, you will find a link to the USPS page, that's the United States Postal Service, which will help you find your zip code or the correct spelling of your address if you're not sure. For filling in the data, start with section 3A, writing the number or name of your street. In 3B, write or enter the floor number if you have an apartment or shared building. If it's not the case, write NA. 3C, you'll write the name of the city or town where you reside. 3D, form gives you different selection options with the initials, all of the states in the United States. If you're outside of the US, don't worry, you can still apply. Remember that to apply for a U visa, the crime must have occurred within the US, but you can still apply from outside the US. Make sure you fill the boxes with your country address, and in the state option, you can select not applicable. Continue filling out your information in the province postal code section. Let's continue with the next part, safe mailing address. This section is used in case you want to receive news about your case at some place other than your home mailing address. Many people who apply for this type of visa do not want certain people to find out, like their significant other. I often recommend that my clients enter the address of our office so that the notifications reach us directly, speeding up the process and preventing anyone who should not find out from doing so. If you don't have a safe mailing address or you don't need a safe mailing address, you can put NA or not applicable. Sometimes PO box, mailbox, friends, family. Again, just make sure it's a safe address. Now, let's talk about the other information section. Here, you should have on hand your A number, social security number, and if you have a work permit, and your USCIS online number. If you don't have these numbers, write not applicable, that's NA. And finally, select your marital status. Moving on to the next page, you should select the box corresponding to your gender, your date of birth, following the format of month, day, and year. This is important because other countries use day, month, and year. But in the US, we're different, so be careful. And don't forget to add your country of birth and nationality. In point 13, form I-94 arrival departure record number. This number is given by a border official when entering the United States legally through a port of entry, like an airport. It used to be a white form, now it's a stamp on your passport. If you can't find the information, you can go to CBP's website, which I'll leave in the description below. You can find the link down there. If you don't have this number, or if you didn't enter the country this way, you can put not applicable. Looking at the website, you should select the option, need a history of your arrivals and departures. Once in this section, you just need to enter your full name, date of birth, and passport number, your country of origin, and there you go. It's going to give you the past 5 years entries and exits. It's really important you have a valid passport for this procedure. If you don't have one, you can ask your lawyer how to handle the situation since each case is unique. CBP website only has the last 5 years. There are other ways to get this information. You can always contact us or contact your attorney. Let's look at passport section for point 15 to 21. It includes just what it sounds, information from your passport. In point 22, you should enter your current immigration status. You may be a visa overstay. My family entered as tourists. They gave us 6 months. We stayed 15 years. Most of it not legal. Maybe that's your situation. Maybe you entered without inspection, meaning illegally. They're asking for your current status today. So if you entered as a tourist in 1981, like my family did, well, you're obviously not a tourist still today. because once 6 months pass, that visa would have expired. But don't worry, U visa allows you to apply regardless of whether you have legal status in the United States or not. It's one of the many benefits that this visa has. Let's look at part 2. In this section of questions, there are 2 possible answers: yes or no. I know that's really tough, right? All these questions are related to obtaining your U visa. Keep in mind that to select the yes option, you must have been a victim of a qualifying crime for a U visa. What's a qualifying crime? Well, it's listed in the Immigration and Naturalization Act, and there's about 23 of them. If you would like more information about that, put a comment below and I'll create a video about it. Now, regarding the questions, starting with question 1, it asks you if you've been a victim of a qualifying crime. If the answer is no, guess what? You're not going to get a U visa. Question 2, it asks about substantial harm you suffered from this crime. For example, physical injury. My wife ran me over twice with the car and then hit me with a baseball bat. Well, that's pretty significant. Broken nose, broken bones, hospital. I'd say that's substantial harm. But it could also be anxiety, nightmares due to the violence. It could be emotional harm, not just physical. If it's physical, there's a variety of ways to show it. Photos, police reports, medical records. If it's emotional, you're probably going to need a psychiatrist and therapist to help. Regarding question 3, you must show that you have information on the crime. Most common example is a police report documenting you were a victim of violent crime and you spoke to the police about the crime. Question 4 refers to Form I-918 Supplement B. It's the law enforcement certification and it is crucial. Without this form, you can't obtain a U visa. This is what I like to call the helping letter. It's a form filled out by law enforcement that indicates you were a victim of a qualifying crime and you were helpful. You can't file without it because you will be denied 100% of the time. But don't worry, I'll leave you a video where I explain everything related to this important document in the comment section below. Question 5 wants to confirm that the crime occurred inside the US. Now, most circumstances, crimes outside the United States don't qualify for U visa, but there's a new criteria for fraud in labor contracting, bringing immigrants to the United States under false pretenses. So there, the crime could have occurred outside the United States. But for most circumstances, have to be inside the US in order to qualify. Question 6 asks if you're under 16 years of age, and this is to determine, in part, who can get a visa through you. If you're underage at the time of the crime, maybe your parents or your siblings might also qualify for this visa. Also, under 16, well, there are certain requirements that are eased, not relevant for purposes of this conversation. Last question asks if you are or ever were in removal proceedings. This includes being apprehended at the border and then not showing up to court. It doesn't matter if you're in removal now or were ever. It's asking ever, right? So if you're no longer in removal but you used to be, that's a yes. If you presently are, that's a yes. If you were apprehended at the border and didn't show up to court, that's a yes. You were in removal. Next section, if you selected yes in any of the prior sections that we just talked about, you have to write and explain what happened, what, where, when, how. And you're gonna need detailed information, and there's a special section for it in section 8. If you're currently in these procedures, you have to write current, meaning if you're charged with a crime or something is still going on right now, you indicate current. If it happened in the past, well, indicate that. The first checkbox for removal applies if you are in a court process with Executive Office of Immigration Review, that's EOIR, otherwise known as Immigration Court. Regarding exclusion and deportation, those were things that were done prior to 1997, so they're not really relevant today. However, if you had any of these procedures, include it that it took place. Number 7E is relevant for certain green card holders. Finally, judicial proceedings are for people who have a pending appeal before the court. Let's continue with more of the second part of this form. In page 3, part 2, number 8 asks about your entries to the US for the last 5 years. They ask date, place of entry, state, and status in which you entered. Moving on to question 11 is for people applying for this visa while outside the United States. Here you should enter the address of the office where you'll be processing your visa. It's usually the closest embassy or consulate to where you live. Moving to part 3. These questions are usually the most complex of this form since they are things that can disqualify you. There are some gotcha questions here. Remember, you have to prove that you qualify for this visa. Depending on how you answer the questions, you might not. My recommendation is to always answer truthfully, no matter what. If you aren't sure how to handle it, call up. If you answer yes to any of these questions, you will have to explain what, where, why, how. Also, if you lie and the government learns that you lied, your petition can be denied and you can be deported. It's fraud. They ask, have you ever been arrested? If you were in prison, where it happened. Keep in mind, some options like having been arrested do not mean that you committed a serious crime. It can also be related if you had an arrest, even for illegal entry to the United States. So these questions ask, did you ever have contact with the police? Ever? If so, what circumstance? So there's a difference between charged with a crime and convicted of a crime. Conviction means you were found guilty at trial or you pled guilty before a judge. While charged with a crime just means you were accused of one. Maybe the charges were dismissed. That's why I rephrased it as any contact with the police, whether it's a conviction or an arrest. If the case is ongoing, so you were charged but not convicted. Either way, they're going to want all the details and the document. I advise that if you do not have a crime, write not applicable in each of the boxes, since USCIS will like to see this information clearly, and this will make your life easier when you're applying for a work permit in the future. The following questions are related to activities in which you have participated and that are considered crimes. To answer these questions, my advice is to be completely honest, even in very particular cases, such as question 8. Perhaps you have lived for a time in a communist country and answered no. Well, this question could cause problems since USCIS, when reviewing your application and research about you, might think you did not write complete truth. So if you grew up in China, China's a communist country, right? If you say no, they're like, well, I don't know, did you not live in China? Oh yeah, I lived my entire life in China, except for the past 3 years. Well, how does that happen? How can you not have been a part of a communist regime? You were. So you have to answer honest, right? It was a communist country. What it is now is a different story. Now, let me give you some advice starting from question 12. Here, you have to clarify the difference between having been part of a criminal or violent activity and having witnessed these acts. This section only talks about only if you were a witness. Similarly, if you answered yes, you got to provide details of what you saw. Now, questions in section 13 are about whether you have ever provided service in person or a detention center. This can include community service if you belong to a social or religious group and can have ever carried out this type of activities. You can also select the yes option and provide an explanation to what it is that you did later on in the form. The same goes for question 14. Maybe you received training that includes weapons. Doesn't mean you belong to a criminal group or are dangerous. There are some countries, there's mandatory military service. Chances are, if you're in the military, you'll learn how to handle a weapon. So you can answer yes to this question, and you got to explain what training you were a part of, when, where, when, how. Another important question is number 29B. This asks whether you've had any history regarding mental condition or behavior that can pose a risk to society or to yourself. Keep in mind, this can include if you have problems related to drugs or alcohol. Again, any questions, talk to an expert immigration lawyer. Part 4, you have to include information about your spouse and children. You need the full name, date, and place of birth for your child, for your spouse, the current location. Regarding information for the spouse, you have to include your current spouse. If you are divorced, it's not necessary to include that person's information. In the last part of this section, filing on behalf of family members, you have to select yes if you're applying for a U visa for other members in your family. If this is your case, you have to include a supplement A. Spouse, parent, child, sibling. Again, depends on the circumstances when you can apply for it. That's not the purpose of this video. But if you are filing for yourself and someone else, you have to indicate yes, and that individual will need a supplement A. That's Form I-918 Supplement A. Not to be confused with Form I-19 Supplement B, which is the law enforcement certification, and just Form I-19, which is all about the victim. Part 5. In this section, you must select if you understand the language with which you are filling out this form, that is English. If you need an interpreter, select box 1B and write what language you're most comfortable with. In the case of option number 2, if someone is filing this form for you, you must write the name of the person helping you. For example, name of your lawyer. Thing to know about notarios, they never put their name, they put your name because they're never responsible for what happens. Attorneys will put their name because they are responsible for what happens. In the next section, you have to write your phone number and email address as the applicant. Now in the declaration and certification section, by signing, you are affirming that all the information provided is correct and true. It's important that you sign and add the date on which you are submitted this request, since if you don't sign it, your request could very well be denied. And waiting 5 years for that seems like a crime. But the signing and affirmation is really important because from immigration's perspective, you don't make mistakes. What you did, you reviewed it 1,000 times and it is perfect. So if there's a mistake, that's you lying now or you lying before. That's how immigration typically looks at it. Read it again. Read it one more time. Make sure it's perfect. Part 6 and 7. These sections are for your interpreter and your representative. In case you have an interpreter, you have to include their full name, address, and contact information. Likewise, you have to include the data of the person who prepared this information for you, such as your lawyer, including whether this person is an accredited lawyer or just a representative who's authorized to help you with the form. Part 8, last section of the form, is to include information that you could not include in the prior section due to space. If you need it, start by writing your full name and writing additional information for each section in the corresponding spaces. Here you'll find the marked spaces for each section that requires extra information. In case you need even more space, you can add extra pages to this form. Just remember to write the number of the section they belong to. And that's all, Immigration Nation. with this information, you'll be able to prepare and fill out Form I-918, and you get that much closer to getting your U visa. We know this visa takes a long time, but the wait is worth it, since it provides you with many benefits and also represents a symbol of justice for the experiences you have gone through. The main requirement for this visa is patience. But don't worry, you're not alone on this road. Remember, we're in this together. Until next time, Immigration Nation, take care.
Hey, did you like the video? I invite you to watch another video where I share more tips on how to protect your reputation as an immigrant. Until next time.